Team Leader Ann. The bodyguard replied, "Thank you, President." As the bodyguard exited, Heavenly Demon lay on the bed. The mental shock was considerable. He desired sleep, but found his eyes wide open. That night, Heavenly Demon stayed awake, fearing a potential nightmare. At lunchtime, Ryu and Minjuri sat down for a meal together. This meeting was primarily for Ryu to share information about Round 8 ahead of time, and Minjuri was in a more fragile mental state than Ryu had expected. Ryu observed and said to himself, "Is it too early to meet up? She seemed a bit off." Then he inquired, "Juri, what's wrong? Don't you have an appetite?" Minjuri began, struggling to articulate her feelings, and said, "Oh no, it's delicious. It's just..." And despite her appetite, she was wrestling with a significant emotional shock. Ryu ventured to ask, trying to read her thoughts. "Was the illusion from Round 7 particularly distressing?" Minjuri stammered, unable to bring herself to discuss it further, and said, "I don't know." She feared that lifting her head would reveal her flushed face, so she kept it lowered. Ryu said, empathizing with her, "Oh, it's not that it was distressing, but rather embarrassing." Having discerned her thoughts, he coughed awkwardly, uncertain of how to proceed. It appeared that, despite his advice, resisting temptation was more challenging than he had anticipated. Then Ryu advised, "Regardless of what the illusion entailed, let's put Round 7 behind us. It's a round that's already passed." Minjuri agreed and said, "Yes, that's true." Ryu continued, "Anyway, there's something I want to tell you about Round 8. In his usual fashion, Ryu delivered a prophecy. Jeffrey, the spy who was nearby, was present, but there was no need for discretion. Ryu deliberately spoke loudly enough for Jeffrey to hear, and he said to himself, "He'll probably pass on my prophecy to Christine." And due to Christine's skeptical nature, one prophecy wouldn't suffice to gain her trust. Therefore, there was no harm in them overhearing the conversation. Then Minjuri inquired, "So, in Round 8, NPCs will appear, right?" Ryu replied, "Yeah. I don't know if they're artificially created NPCs or beings from another dimension." This time, Ryu explained the strategy in greater detail. Unlike Round 7, Round 8 offered many opportunities to gain experience points. In other words, it was crucial to level up by exploiting various aspects. Ryu was providing as much assistance as possible at this time. And Ryu added, "And there's one more thing to keep in mind." Minjuri asked, "What is it?" He replied, "In Round 8, you won't be able to accompany the Black Scythe as you did in the past." Minjuri inquired, her eyes widening. "Huh? Why?" Ryu explained the reason for this change, which left Minjuri perplexed. And she said, "Why?" Ryu stated matter-of-factly, "Why he is making that choice, I don't know. I can only foresee the future." Then he casually observed Minjuri, who appeared puzzled. And suddenly, memories of past experiences resurfaced in his mind. The girl who had learned his true identity and was at risk of being manipulated and harmed. And Ryu said to himself, "No, it's just an illusion. It's like a daydream. I won't let that happen." He was determined to ensure the safety of those around him at all costs. On the other hand, Christine, with her slightly puffy face, awaited her father, appearing somewhat anxious. When his father arrived, he was surprised and said, "When did you get here?" She replied, "Just a little while ago." And she asked, "Well, what do you want to discuss? Isn't it about inquiring about Round 7? He said, "Yeah, I already heard about that through Jeffrey. A round filled with illusions, right?" She responded, "Yes." Then he inquired, "What kind of illusion did you witness?" She replied, "It was related to you, father." He was surprised and inquired, "Me?" She replied, "Yes, father. You were being threatened by the believers. I found myself in a situation where I had no choice but to commit suicide." He said, "That's quite something. The more I think about it, the more sinister this sorcery becomes." She added, "Father, it's the work of the angels you believe in." He said with confidence, "No, there's no way. Those are evil spirits disguising themselves as angels. Sometimes Satan appears before us in familiar forms." Then she inquired, "You're saying that all of this isn't God's will?" He replied, "You're stating the obvious. Is it due to a lack of faith? Or have you been ensnared by demons?" Christine sighed and said, Seeing the things I believed in being betrayed in the illusions made my heart waver." Her dad said, "Don't worry needlessly. Focus only on leveling up and saving people. Don't entertain any other thoughts." She said yes. Then he suddenly said, "Also, about the so-called prophet you mentioned before." She inquired, "The Korean guy?" He replied, "Yes. When I asked Jeffrey, it seemed that his prophecy was somewhat accurate." She said thoughtfully, "Do not be ensnared by temptation, right?" "That's correct. Honestly, I didn't believe it at first, but it turned out to be the key to clearing the quest. Then he smiled and said, then it might be a good idea to get closer to that prophet. The unexpected statement caused Christine to widen her eye. It wasn't something she expected to hear from her conservative father. And she inquired, really? Do you believe him just because he got one thing right? Her dad said, even if it's a lucky guess. What do you think, Christine? The unexpected remark left Christine perplexed. Then she asked, have you conducted a background check? He replied, he appears to be an ordinary young man who commutes between home and work. Christine didn't blame her father for conducting the background check. Instead, she understood why he did it, given her natural skepticism towards people. Even before she got engaged with her fiancé, her father had Jeffrey investigate the man thoroughly. Then she asked, Father, do you think it's necessary to rely on him so much? He said, isn't your fiancé doing the same? They're even doing business together. Despite her father's attempt to convince her, Christine was still hesitant and said, but there's a possibility that he's a fraud. Her dad said, in that case, how about doing this, Christine? But at the right moment, Jeffrey returned. The pastor asked, Jeffrey, what's this all of a sudden? Jeffrey replied, I just obtained information about round 8 from that guy. It was not exactly obtaining information, but rather eavesdropping. But it seemed fine in this context. What mattered was the information itself. Christine inquired, round 8? Does this mean you heard a prophecy? He said, yes. He was quite detailed this time. Christine, if you're still doubtful, you can test it in the 8th round and decide afterward. She thought for a moment and said, that's not a bad idea. I'd prefer that. However, a little later, the three of them realized there was no need to eavesdrop, as a call came from Heavenly Demon, who felt sorry for keeping his prophecy to himself. Back to Ryu. After the encounter with Minjuri, Ryu's actions outside were all about exterminating millworms. Then the system message appeared. Current kill count, 100 out of 100. With the Rune of Slaughter, all stats receive a 100% boost. Ryu's gaze shifted to one side of the message. With the Bless skill, all stats enjoy a 60% increase. Duration, 2 hours, 51 minutes, 21 seconds. Then Ryu said, all set. The preparations are done. And from the inventory, he pulled out an item. Surprise potion box, type, consumable, grade, unique, effect. Get 1 to 5 random potions. Usage restriction. Until the next round, master grade or above. Description, a time-limited item where you can roll random potions. The item vanishes automatically when transitioning to the next round and is influenced by luck stats. Ryu added, boosting luck as much as possible will result in getting more potions, and they could be of different types or even duplicates. Either way, the more the better, so raising luck was the only option. When Ryu used it, a message appeared. You've used the surprise potion box. Congratulations, life potion obtained. Congratulations, healing potion obtained. Congratulations, dark magic potion obtained. Congratulations, lowest agility potion obtained. Congratulations, potion of icy chill obtained. Seeing that, Ryu smiled and said, fortunately, they were different types of potions, and 5 too. Life potion, type, consumable. Grade, legendary. Effect, player resurrection. Usage restriction, master grade or above. Description, a potion that resurrects a desired player. Must be used within 10 minutes of death, and if the corpse is more than 30% damaged, it cannot be used. Cannot be used on oneself. Healing potion. Type, consumable. Grade, rare. Effect, wound recovery. Usage restriction, novice grade or above. Description, a potion that heals internal and external injuries. More effective than emergency treatment. Dark magic potion. Type, consumable. Grade, rare. Effect, dark magic recovery. Usage restriction, novice grade or above. Description, recovers dark magic used by dark orcs. Only effective for specific professions. Lowest agility potion. Type, consumable. Grade, normal. Effect, +2 agility for 24 hours. Usage restriction, novice grade or above. Description, potion that increases agility stat. Multiple consumptions do not stack. Potion of icy chill. Type, consumable. Grade, rare. Effect, plus 50% cold resistance for 24 hours. Usage restriction, novice grade or above. Description, Potion that enhances resistance to cold. Resists not only cold damage, but also status abnormalities. Ryu's eyes widened as he looked at the list, especially where his gaze fell, the first life potion that appeared, and said, "To think a potion that resurrects people would come out. Truly a legendary grade potion." Of course, the other potions were good too, but none could compare to the life potion. Then Ryu added, "However, it can only be used by those of master grade or higher. Plus, it can only be used on others." But just having a legendary grade potion is valuable in itself. Even if he didn't need it now, possessing such a potion could bring tremendous benefits, as it might be good for persuading the alchemist. The only class capable of crafting potions, the alchemist, was a guy in Nigeria, and Ryu added, making him an ally would undoubtedly be helpful. Although he's reluctant to come forward for now, once the alchemist's existence becomes known, it will create a sensation. But before that happened, if I made my move first, I might be able to monopolize the alchemist's abilities. But among these potions, one seems useless, none other than the dark magic potion. Ryu inquired, "Is this potion solely for the dark magic record?" In fact, the only wielder of dark magic is the unique Dark Knight class. In simpler terms, this potion is exclusively tailored for the dark magic potion. For ordinary players, consuming it won't yield any effects. The same goes for Ryu. Then Ryu smiled and said, "Maybe I should try selling it at a hefty price to the Dark Knight, but for now, let's keep it. What I need isn't money anyway." And he decided to hang on to the rest as well, given that he wasn't in a dire financial situation necessitating an immediate sale on the market. Upon returning home, Ryu, lying back on the bed, clad in casual clothes, he reached for his phone and said, "Let's see if any unique material items have popped up." While browsing the site, Ryu was amazed and said, "Oh, is there one again this time? A unique material item." After tapping the payment button, Ryu set his phone aside and said, "Another task done today." And he added, "Well, round 7 wasn't a hunting round. Perhaps I should look forward to the rounds that followed." Feeling fatigued, Ryu gradually closed his eyes. In the next part, Ryu will meet the Heavenly Demon. Every Tuesday, Player Place held regular meetings. Even Ryu, the majority shareholder, made sure to attend them all without fail, considering it an opportunity to leave a positive impression on Heavenly Demon. Ryu observed Heavenly Demon, who was presiding over the meeting, and after a round of diverse opinions, the meeting drew to a close. The executives rose from their seats and exited the meeting room. Only Ryu and Heavenly Demon stayed in the room. It was an opportune moment for a private conversation. Then Heavenly Demon said, "Major shareholder, or rather prophet, thanks to you we safely survived the 7th round. I'm sincerely grateful." Ryu said, "Fortunately, you remembered not to surrender to temptation." Heavenly Demon added, "Yes. When it happened, your words flashed in my mind. If it weren't for you, I might have given in. It's a bit embarrassing to admit, but the illusion was quite vivid." Though he concealed it out of embarrassment, Ryu had already discerned the nature of the temptation Heavenly Demon faced. Then Heavenly Demon said, "By the way, Prophet, I have a question." It was a question that had been on his mind for a few days now. He asked, "You knew the answer, so why couldn't you secure a higher rank? It wasn't a round that demanded excessive effort. If you possessed knowledge of the round, securing the top spot would have been a breeze. So why didn't you?" It was a sharp question, but Ryu answered calmly, "I thought you, Heavenly Demon, also knew the answer. Why couldn't you secure the top spot?" For a moment, Heavenly Demon appeared as if he had been blindsided. Then Ryu added, "Even if you're aware that resisting temptation is crucial, when the moment arrives, executing this becomes quite challenging. Having experienced it firsthand, you get it, right?" Heavenly Demon swiftly dispelled his suspicions and said, "Yes, indeed, I understand. Got it." Yet, instead of dwelling on his inquiry, he reproached himself for the brief lapse in his thinking, and said to himself, "Certainly, he's not someone to underestimate just because he's young. There's a subtle blend of insight and seasoned experience." And he acknowledged that the prophet had not only demonstrated prowess in prophecy, but also seemed quite insightful and wise. From Ryu's standpoint, which aimed to encourage openness and trust, it wasn't an entirely pleasant situation, and he said to himself, "It's not wise to make him overly cautious." Then Heavenly Demon inquired, "Prophet, you mentioned you had something to tell me?" Ryu replied, "Yes, I wanted to share information about round 8, and he promptly provided the information for the next round as planned. Heavenly Demon said with an expression full of happiness, Wow, this time there's a wealth of detailed information. Ryu said, "That's right for round 8, he said gratefully. "Thank you, Prophet. You always provide such invaluable assistance. I'm not sure how I can repay you." Ryu said, "Don't burden yourself too much. Isn't it wonderful to collaborate from the standpoint of being on the same boat?" He smiled and said, "Thank you so much." Despite the advice not to feel burdened, Ryu continued to accumulate a sense of indebtedness. And suddenly, Heavenly Demon said, Prophet, while you're helping me, can I ask for one more favor?" Ryu inquired. "What favor?" He said, "Do you remember my fiancé from the other day?" Ryu responded, "Of course." Heavenly Demon asked, "Is it okay to share this information with my fiancé?" Ryu smiled and said to himself, "Probably she already got the information from the spy." Then he said to Heavenly Demon, "Certainly it's fine. I already allowed sharing when I prophesied separately back then. Consider it already permitted when round 11 becomes dangerous." He said happily, "Oh, thank you for allowing it." Ryu said to himself, it seemed more and more people were sharing future information, but it was fine. And if I have to lead a few people with me to the last round, it's better to make them rely on prophecy to survive until then. Smiling slyly with a compassionate expression, Ryu was about to discuss business when the bodyguard entered the conference room. There was a sense of urgency in his expression. "Not missing this?" Heavenly Demon asked seriously. "Manager An, what's the matter?" He said, "The chairman is here." Heavenly Demon was surprised and inquired, "My father?" Then he hastily rushed out. At the door, Chairman Ma Dai Cheol of Oseong Group was entering. Heavenly Demon said, "Father, Chairman, why did you come here without saying anything?" He said, "Do I have to notify anyone when I decide to visit my son's company?" Heavenly Demon said, "Well, even so, you should have at least given a heads up so we could prepare." His dad said, "Enough. I'm just going to take a look around briefly." Having shared those words, Ma Dai Cheol, gripping his curiosity, casually toured the company premises and said, "You've gathered it up rather nicely. I've heard positive things. They say it had a good start." Heavenly Demon inquired, "Where did you pick up on that?" His dad smiled and said, "If you're asking this, then you're still too naive. And even your brothers have sent their congratulations." At the mention of brothers, Heavenly Demon's gaze shifted and said, "Oh, those brothers who didn't bother sending a single congratulatory wreath." His dad said, "Don't say that. Whether you liked it or not, they're still family." He inquired, "Can we really call those who set their sights on your fortune family?" His dad smiled and said, "Are you any different?" Heavenly Demon said, "I'm only engaging in competition because I don't want to divide shares with my brothers." "Didn't you agree to that, Father? If I prove my skills are better than theirs, you'll acknowledge me as the successor and inherit all the property." He inquired, "Right. Is that possible?" "There's less than a year left until the agreed-upon time." Heavenly Demon replied, "Just give me a little more time. The start of this company is much more promising than the consulting we did before. We still need a few more months of observation, though." Then his dad inquired, "Why did you abandon consulting?" "It wasn't bad enough to warrant such a change," he responded. "There was no room for further growth. Besides, would you have acknowledged me to that extent?" With a smile, his dad said, "Humph, certainly not. If you can't make it into the top 50 in Kosdaq market cap, being 150th doesn't matter." Heavenly Demon added, "That's why I gave up on that company." His dad added, "A bold move, venturing into an uncertain industry." Heavenly Demon fell silent. In truth, without Ryu's suggestion, there would have been no need to switch industries. And suddenly his dad asked, "What about the idea of creating a player market? Did you think of it because you're a player?" Heavenly Demon hesitated at the chairman's question and said to himself, "Should I tell the truth? That it was Ryu's idea, or should I entirely attribute it to my own merit?" He had to make a choice, and he knew what the right choice was, and said to himself, "Father is someone who wouldn't miss that." Inwardly sighing, Heavenly Demon honestly admitted, "That idea wasn't mine." The chairman inquired what. He replied, "The majority shareholder who acquired our company at 51% suggested and conceived that idea. We're working together as business colleagues now." His dad asked, "It wasn't your idea? Who is this major shareholder then?" Heavenly Demon turned around and said to Ryu, "Major shareholder, can I have a moment?" Ryu said, "Oh, sure." Then Heavenly Demon added, "Chairman, this is the person." Ryu said, "Hello, I'm Ryu Min. The chairman maintained a poker face. However, internally he was quite surprised and said to himself, "Is this guy, who looks like he just turned 20, the majority shareholder?" The president was doing his best to hide his surprise, finding it quite challenging given the unexpected youthfulness of the top executive of the company, and asked himself, holding 51% of the company at such a young age? Doesn't that imply possession of assets exceeding 280 billion? Then he asked Ryu, "Word is that you own 51% of this company. Is that true?" Ryu replied, "Yes, President." The chairman inquired, "If it's all right, could you reveal the company you're affiliated with?" Ryu nodded and said, "My parents are deceased, and my background is rather ordinary. I was fortunate enough to accumulate that sum. Luck was on my side, allowing me to strike gold." The chairman asked, "But will you pour all that money into my son's company?" Ryu replied, "I was confident." Then he inquired, "Confident that changing the industry would lead to substantial growth?" Ryu said yes. The expression was unchanged, but the president was internally astonished and said to himself, "This is certainly an extraordinary young man." Even facing him directly, there was no flicker in his gaze or tremor in his voice. And luck might play a part, but often luck slips away even when it arrives. This is why there's a saying that luck is a skill. Then he asked, "How old are you?" Ryu replied, "I'm 20 this year." The chairman said to himself, an age fitting his appearance. But the attitude he displayed was anything but typical. Did my son have this level of insight and boldness at 20? Ma Dai-cheol could only shake his head. His children were talented, but this young man surpassed them. Then he inquired, "Did you confidently propose this business idea?" Ryu replied, "I proposed it, but I only threw out the idea. Most of the detailed systems here are President Ma's work." He was surprised and inquired, "Kyung-rok?" As Ryu redirected the spotlight, Ma Kyung-rok was quietly surprised. Unexpected, as he hadn't foreseen such a statement. And Ryu added, "To be honest, I didn't do much. President Ma conceptualized specific systems, crafted various business ideas, and managed them. I merely provided the framework. President Ma filled in the bones and flesh all night long." He inquired, "Is that true?" Ryu replied, "Yes. It might look good if he were the chairman of Osung Group, but Ryu was actually promoting Heavenly Demon. However, Ma Dai-cheol, with extensive experience and knowledge, couldn't be unaware of this fact, and he said to himself, this young man knows how to uplift others and not be greedy, huh?" He couldn't help but consider him a truly promising talent. He even wanted to make him an apprentice and teach him proper business management. Suddenly, he realized what he was thinking and said to himself, am I getting too old? Why am I having such thoughts?" Then Ma Dai-cheol cleared his mind with a cough and turned away, and said, "All right, with this level of passion, there's nothing to worry about in the future." Saying that, Ma Dai-cheol moved away without a word of farewell, and he didn't turn his head once. Then Heavenly Demon said, "Major shareholder, you spoke really well." Ryu chuckled and said, "You don't know how nervous I was inside." But Heavenly Demon didn't smile. There was something he wanted to ask seriously, and he asked, "Major shareholder, why did you tell my father that it was all my hard work? Surely you suggested many ideas as well." Ryu replied, "But it's all ideas. Isn't it you who worked it out? You developed it and executed those ideas, right?" "I just told the truth." Heavenly Demon silently observed Ryu. Almost facing the risk of having someone else's efforts wrongly attributed, Ma Kyung-rok managed to salvage his pride, courtesy of the acknowledgement extended by his father. "It's all thanks to major shareholder Ryu." Then Heavenly Demon's gaze toward Ryu underwent a transformation, a touch softer, transitioning from the glare of vigilance. Quietly, Ryu couldn't help but crack a relieved smile, and said to himself, "Fortunately, I could ease his wariness. And better to build goodwill with Heavenly Demon like this." On the other hand, LC Group, a formidable rival of Osung Group. With every news he read, LC Group Chairman Song Baekyun's face carried a growing weight of concern. Player Place Corporation, stock on the rise again today. Player Place nearing 100,000 users in just a month. A company growing day by day. Player Place. Player Place's success secret? Precise understanding of players' needs. Player Place's CEO unveiled as Osung Group's successor. Seeing all those articles, he inquired, "Did they throw money around?" "Why are there so many articles?" muttered Song Baekyun, clicking through the comments on an article. Who else is using Player Place? Me. Selling items here is genuinely convenient. The app's user-friendliness is top-notch. I sold all the unnecessary materials on Player Place, too. This is right. Anyone who doesn't invest in Player Place is an idiot. Maybe Chairman Song of LC Group won't invest because of his pride. Player Place was made by Osung Group. It's a big hit. Song Baekhyun simply turned off the monitor. Reading further might lead to dying of anger. Suddenly someone knocked on the door. Song Baekhyun said, "Come in." Upon seeing the person entering the office, Song Baekhyun's eyebrows shot up like arrows. It was none other than his eldest son, Song Jae-gyum, and he is the president of the Player Haven Cafe. Jae-gyum inquired, "Father, you called?" His dad said, "Jae-gyum, how old are you this year?" Jae-gyum replied, 32 years old, sir." As a sigh escaped the chairman's mouth, Jae-gyum lowered his head like a sinner. Then his dad inquired, "You can only be a player if you're 29, right?" Jae-gyum replied, "Yes, sir." He asked, "Aren't you feeling unjust? Just a 3-year difference and you could be a player." Jae-gyum said, "Well." Then his dad added, "Becoming a player would give you abilities even if you're incompetent. How great is that, to gain supernatural abilities even if you're inept, right?" It might be great, but Jae-gyum couldn't smile, because he knew his father's words were mocking his incompetence. His dad added, "Look at our rival, Osung Group. Despite expanding globally, we always lag behind as second. Why is that? Our technology isn't significantly inferior, right? And people remember only the first place. If it's not the first, second, or third, doesn't matter. And that first place is often influenced by luck. The gap between second and first isn't that significant. Do you understand what this means?" The president continued saying, "It means with effort even second place can become first. Just with effort. But even though we make tremendous efforts, we can't surpass them. The gap has widened so much that ordinary effort can't narrow it. In that case, we need to strike a heavy blow, right?" By now, he was so accustomed to these kinds of lectures that it would be strange not to hear them. Then his dad asked, "You know what article I read a little while ago?" Jae-gyum replied, "Probably something about Osung Group. You've been reading those topics all week." His dad said, "Recently, Osung Group has been making waves with a groundbreaking app. Have you heard of Player Place?" With slightly widened eyes, Song Jae-gyum nodded, as if acknowledging his awareness, and said, "I have." He added, "Apparently, Osung Group created that app. And guess who's behind it? Their second son, Heavenly Demon, is the representative of Player Place." Song Jae-gyum's expression hardened as if he had tasted something bitter. Then his dad inquired, "How many years apart are you and Ma Kyung-rok?" Jae-gyum replied, 3 years. He said frustratedly, "He's younger than you, right? But that young man still has the vision to run such a company, especially seeing him explode with such a good idea. On the other hand, some, despite growing up in an environment where success is practically guaranteed, can't even get a single line of news with their name on it." Despite the clear comparison, Song Jae-gyum remained silent. He wasn't bothered by it anymore. His father continued saying, "If you were at least a player, I wouldn't have pressured you like this. What should you do then? Shouldn't you try to expand your business like Ma Kyung-rok? Not necessarily aiming for a big hit, maybe a moderate success, or even something small, right?" As the eldest son of LC Group, Jae-gyum said, "I will show results." He inquired, "Really? Well, do you have any ongoing projects?" Jae-gyum replied, "I am preparing something quietly." He asked, "What is it?" Jae-gyum responded, "It's not time to reveal yet. Please wait a little longer, father." He said, "Didn't you say something like this last time? Don't make excuses to avoid criticism." Jae-gyum said, "I really mean it. Please watch and wait. I am preparing a significant thing." His dad sighed and said, "Well, understood. You should have something by now. Go on." Jae-gyum said, "Yes, please rest comfortably." And he left the chairman's office. Closing the door, he pondered deeply and said to himself, "How did things come to this point? It's all because of that Ma Kyung-rok guy." In fact, when someone is repeatedly compared to the point where it becomes like a label in one's ears, it's inevitable to harbor resentment. And he said, "Who wouldn't want to become a player, claiming it's themselves? But what can I do about bad luck? Some might consider it fortunate to be excluded by just a 3-year difference. After all, it was a life-or-death survival game. But for Song Jae-gyum, whose reality was hell, it was nothing but misfortune. And he said, I wish I had become a player at least. If that were the case, I could have competed with Heavenly Demon on an equal footing. But regretting now is pointless. With the sound of footsteps, Song Jae-gyum walked and entered his private office. The stress had been overwhelming lately, and he inquired. Player Place was Ma Kyung-rock's? He was unable to bear the idea that Player Place was Heavenly Demon's. It was the first time he heard this information, and suddenly, irritation surged within him, and he said, without even knowing, I had recommended it to cafe members to use. Wasn't this indirectly helping the rival I wanted to kill? Then he saw another article that caught his eye. National Assembly member Lee Seong-hyun. Massive player act passes. Lee Seong-hyun says, players are like society's cancer. With the increase in player crimes, voices supporting Lee Seong-hyun are growing. When the law is enacted, players will be suppressed by force. Player catching players, we decided to prioritize players among the police. As early as next month, a large player police organization will be formed. Reading that, he said, as expected, that guy was a troublesome. In fact, Song Jae-gyum also harbors a disdain for players, but to expand, influence, and compete with Heavenly Demon, it's unavoidable to side with the players. Then he added, that member of the National Assembly, we can't leave him alone. Seeing that the meeting time had arrived, Song Jae-gyum logged into the chat room. Despite it not being a regular meeting day, Ryu was making his way to Lost Yak's residence. It was an unexpected urgent summons. Ryu wondered, it's not even Sunday, so what's going on? Could it be? Are they already putting the plan into action? While he had a hunch, he knew he had to attend the meeting first. And after flawlessly transforming into the spitting image of Lost Yak, Ryu took his seat in front of the computer and entered the chat room. Upon joining, he found Yamti and the president eagerly awaiting. The president said, you made it? Ryu said, oh, sorry for being late. The president's expression seemed darker than usual, and he said, it's okay. Honestly, we were worried you wouldn't show. Each member's situation is critical. Ryu said to himself, what's happening? What's his deal? It was a pity that he couldn't read his mind through the video chat. Then the president asked, Yamti, how did the executive interviews we planned last time go? Yamti replied, yes, it's still ongoing, but at least 3 of them have successfully passed the murder test. He inquired, so, they're okay with our cafe? Yamti replied, yes, indeed. They are positive about our cafe, to the extent that we could sit them in a meeting without any issues. Hearing that, Ryu said to himself, 3? Who are these individuals aiming for an executive position? Certainly they must have committed murder without hesitation, tempted by the position. Then the president asked, so, we can use them as part of our team? Yamti replied, yes, but what's the matter? The president cut in with a determined look and said, tomorrow we execute the plan. Curious, Ryu inquired, Mr. President, what do you mean by the plan? He replied. Capturing National Assembly member Lee Seong-hyun. That's the plan. Ryu said to himself, that explains the urgency. As expected, he had long asserted that a countermeasure was needed against National Assembly member Lee Seong-hyun, who had displayed hostility towards players. So, he has decided to kidnap him? Ryu added, I saw recent articles. It says that National Assembly member Lee Seong-hyun successfully passed the Anti-Player Act. Then Ryu explained, that law stipulates, to effectively suppress players who commit crimes, a special organization composed of police officers who are players will be established, according to the act. And the ironic part is that the members of the special organization are players who were selected from the police. In other words, players who are police officers will catch criminal players with power. The chairman nodded in agreement with the explanation and said, that's right. The problem is that now that the act has passed, our cafe's position will undoubtedly decrease, Ryu inquired. So, kidnapping? The president replied, yes. By kidnapping Lee Seong-hyun and showing it to the public as an example, the voices of protest will decrease. Ryu was shocked and said to himself, an example? Are they planning to execute him? Then he raised his hand and suggested an opposing opinion, saying, but, Mr. President, doesn't showing such public murder prove that the Anti-Player Act is necessary? The president said, I am aware of that. It might even backfire. Therefore, we won't take on the role of kidnapping, Ryu inquired. What? Then, the president smiled slightly. and said, "We will fabricate it as if ordinary citizens kidnapped Lee Seong-hyun. We will use money to hire ordinary citizens with a criminal record to make it look like they kidnapped him. Of course, the actual kidnapping will be done by us," Ryu inquired. "So you're saying you'll stage it?" he said. "Exactly. After secretly kidnapping Lee Seong-hyun, we'll make it look like ordinary citizens did it, and we'll even carry out a public execution. At that point, we will intervene too late, trying to stop the criminals and save Lee Seong-hyun, but by then, Lee Seong-hyun will already be dead. With this way, we not only achieve the goal of killing Lee Seong-hyun, but also officially let the citizens know that our cafe is not an enemy." Then Ryu said to himself there wasn't a scenario like this in the previous regressions. In previous regressions, Lee Seong-hyun showed hostility towards players too. Then, the cafe proceeded to kidnap him in the same way. But at that time, I didn't know about this plan. I saved Lee Seong-hyun before he was kidnapped. In fact, Ryu didn't know about this plan despite successfully rescuing Lee Seong-hyun and forming a bond with him. But his ability to transform into Lost Yak had revealed these hidden aspects. Without it, he might have remained in the dark. Then he smiled and said to himself, getting the assassin's mask early turned out to be a wise move. After that, Ryu inquired, "However, Mr. President, the act has already passed. Will eliminating Lee Seong-hyun make any difference?" He replied, a question fitting for Lost Yak. "Certainly there will be changes. First and foremost, the act loses its influence with the demise of the outspoken congressman. Moreover, not only that, but we might also get an opportunity to select members for the anti-player police unit." Ryu said, "Ah, I see." The president added, "Plus, getting rid of Lee Seong-hyun will prevent proposing more anti-player acts. Simply blocking those acts makes him worth the sacrifice. Do you get it?" Ryu said, "Yes, Mr. President, I understand." Having comprehended the president's intentions and the overall plan, Ryu inquired about the detailed plan and asked, "So, how do you plan to find ordinary citizens for the show?" He replied, "Our connection with the police department will make it easy to check individuals with red flags. We'll approach them, check if they have any qualms about making some money, and then recruit about half a dozen." In fact, the president had it all planned out, and it seemed like a plan that had been contemplated for a while, not hastily concocted. Then the president inquired, "Yamti, you mentioned we could mobilize 3 executives immediately, right?" She replied, "Yes." He added, "When we execute the kidnapping of Lee Seong-hyun, involve them as well. Yamti, you'll be in charge of overseeing the congressman's abduction." She said, "Understood. Trust me with that." Then he addressed his words to Ryu and said, "Lostyak, assist Yamti in preparing for the kidnapping. I'll send you the location and Lee Seong-hyun's schedule." Ryu asked, "When is the execution time?" The president replied, "The execution time is when Congressman Lee Seong-hyun goes to his office, tomorrow at 8 a.m. The next day, in a press conference, Congressman Lee Seong-hyun attacked the players, and after the end of the conference, he went out accompanied by his bodyguard. He was also a player, and he paid him a large sum because he realizes that life is priceless. When the bodyguard opened the rear door, Lee Seong-hyun got in without suspicion. But there was a woman sitting in the driver's seat whom he hadn't seen before. So he asked, "Who are you?" Yamti replied, "Hello, Congressman. Nice to meet you." He asked angrily, "Who the hell are you?" But suddenly, Lee Seong-hyun could no longer speak. He was knocked unconscious by the hand of the security guard who had opened the door a moment ago. The bodyguard said, "Yamti, it's ready." She said, "Yes, I'll go first. Please follow slowly." Then the car carrying the congressman smoothly exited the parking lot. In fact, Yamti have a strong rune, enchanting rune. Effect, seduce and dominate humans with just eye contact or physical contact. Can dominate up to 5 people and can only be used on the opposite sex. Duration is infinite, and the enchanted person remains loyal to the owner. Cannot be used on monsters or angels. And the enchanting rune's real-world application proved exceptional. But the problem that she can't enchant the same target again after releasing it. And in round 3, she could even change professions to a tamer. It was a job of capturing monsters and taming them. Since she couldn't seduce monsters with her rune, it was the perfect job. Although, it's a bit disappointing that there are only 5 slots, but the enchanting rune was undeniably incredible. It was enviable. almost like having the authority of a district representative. Enchantment isn't just for players, it can dominate any human. Level or job didn't matter. Even against opponents stronger than her, it didn't matter. If you set your mind to it, even the president can be beguiled. Enchantment possesses a unique power, an ability to dominate akin to the authority of a zone representative, or perhaps even surpassing it. With the Tamer ability, Yamti could command monsters, placing every living being under her watchful eye. Having this rune, her life became easier, as she could do whatever she wanted, but she was bored. And during that time, Yamti stumbled upon a cafe named Player Haven. Impressed by the cafe's charm, she decided to take the interview test, only to discover it involved becoming entangled in a murder. But for someone who had already committed such an act, it posed little difficulty. And she said to herself, if I excel at this, could I manipulate the individual who founded the cafe? Building trust, she ascended to a leadership position and proposed extending interactions beyond video chats to include offline meetings. Ultimately, in the real world, Yamti encountered the individual known as the chairman. When Yamti met him, she smiled and said, "Oh, you're the chairman, the visionary behind the cafe? Greetings." The president, "Hello? You must be Yamti?" Sharing a smile and making eye contact, Yamti effortlessly dominated the chairman, and the system message appeared for her. Average person Song Jag Yum has fallen under enchantment. Yamti was surprised and said, "Huh? Wait, an average person?" While players were labeled as such, discovering he was an average person was perplexing. But for Yamti, the distinction held little significance, and she smiled and said, "Whether a player or not, I can control the chairman of Player Haven at my whim." Then she ordered him, "Don't address me as your master in public. Act like I'm an early member like the other executives." He said, "Understood." With the son of such a corporation held as a metaphorical slave, financial concerns were virtually non-existent. Then she inquired, "But Chairman, why did you create the cafe?" He replied, "At first the idea was to gather players since I couldn't become one. Now it's about expanding influence and surprising my father." She said, "Ah, attempting to earn approval from your father." He added, "Yes, but before that, I must kill Heavenly Demon." Yamti inquired, "Heavenly Demon?" He replied, "He's the eldest son of O-Sung Group. My father always compares me to him. Hence, I need to eliminate him as soon as possible. If I don't, I'll be subjected to endless comparisons." Though she claimed to have enchanted him, it merely increased his liking from 0 to 100. These individuals also think and feel. Even under the influence, their existing sentiments of revenge and inferiority persist. Then Yamti said, "You harbored a hidden agenda all along. I understand how you feel. I'll assist you in killing Ma Kyung-rok," he inquired. "Really?" she replied, "but only when our influence surpasses its current state. If we become so powerful, Ma Kyung-rok will have no choice but to join Player Haven." Then Yamti grinned slyly and said, "That's when we will kill him." Returning to the present time, Yamti looked at the member of the National Assembly and said, he should have kept a better eye on his subordinates. For Yamti, asserting control over the bodyguards was no challenge. Then she added, "The bodyguards' enchantment has just been lifted. By now, they're probably regaining their senses and searching for the members of the National Assembly." Lifting the enchantment on the bodyguards had been intentional, as they needed to know about the members of the National Assembly's kidnapping to prompt the necessary action. In fact, the kidnapping wasn't her order, but a plan devised and executed by the chairman himself. And she added, "The chairman surprised me by suddenly announcing the kidnapping of the members of the National Assembly, even though it wasn't planned. It's been a while since he's come up with an operation I like. But he should have given me a heads up before planning something like this. I should warn him not to do it again." Arriving at a remote mountain valley with an uncertain location, Yamti stepped out of the car. As soon as the door opened, the lively gazes of some people turned towards Yamti. One said, "Oh, you've arrived, Yamti-nim." These were the 3 high-ranking executives recently recruited through a rigorous interview process. After placing the member of the National Assembly in a chair, Yamti smiled and spoke. "I've chosen you 3 well. It's nice to see that sharp look in your eyes." One said, "Thank you for your praise, Yamti-nim." Another said, "Yamti-nim, your eyes are truly beautiful as well, and your well-built body." She smiled and said, "Thank you." But suddenly Yamti grabbed the man's finger that had just spoken and broke it. And she added, "Where did you learn to make inappropriate remarks to your superior? I feel like punishing you. The man with the broken finger immediately apologized. In fact, Yamti's strength was beyond imagination, but that wasn't the reason that he apologized, as he was currently under the control of the enchantment rune. Then she said, other executives should be cautious too. If you belittle a woman, you'll all face consequences. Understood? They said, oh, we understand. We'll do whatever you say, Yamtinim. She added, come here. I'll treat your finger. And after giving emergency treatment to the injured man, Yamti did not release the enchantment because she was concerned that the guy might seek revenge and disrupt the plans. Because once controlled, he can't be controlled again. Later, when the work is over, she can just kill him, and that's it. But suddenly, Lee Seong-hyun, who had awakened from the other guy's scream a while ago, blinked, and he asked, who are you guys? Yamti said, wait a moment, let me get some rope to tie him up. While Yamti went to get a rope, Lee Seong-hyun got up from his seat, and one said, hey, old man, sit down, sit. He said, these guys, do you know what you've done? You kidnapped a member of the National Assembly, you idiots. One smiled and said, so what? If we want, we can kidnap the president, he inquired. What? Another added, besides, we're going to kill you soon. But we're not the ones killing you, though. We'll be treated as heroes of the nation. Listening to the laughter of the criminals, Lee Seong-hyun furrowed his brows and said, what the hell are these guys talking about? Yamti, who had returned, pressed her finger to her lips as if to signal them to be quiet, and said, don't reveal the plan so recklessly. Then she approached Lee Seong-hyun, who wore a bewildered expression, and said to him, all right, I've brought the rope. Please sit quietly in the chair. He shouted, you fucking butch! What are you doing? She said calmly, let me ask you, what are you trying to do, Congressman? You've already figured out the situation. You know we're kidnapping you and soon you'll die. So why are you provoking me? Then she smiled as if she figured out something and said, you're eager to go see your son, huh? He was shocked and inquired what. Yamti added, don't worry, soon we'll send you to your son. He said angrily, you feckin' bitch! Suddenly, Yamti made eye contact with Lee Seong-hyun and ordered, stay still, we'll send you off nicely. Don't you want to see your son? Lee Seong-hyun's movements ceased, as if he had given up on life, and said yes. Seeing that, one inquired, oh, what happened to him? He turned into a puppy in front of Yamti. Another said, as expected of Yamti. The observing executives were impressed, but for Yamti, it was an easy task. Then Yamti sighed inwardly as she read the message that appeared on Lee Seong-hyun's enchantment. Ordinary Lee Seong-hyun has been enchanted. 1. Song Jae-gyum, ordinary. 2. Doll plus I, player. 3. Lee Seong-hyun, ordinary. 4. None. 5. None. And she said, I've used up the enchantment slot again. In fact, she wanted to save the slots if possible, but there were only 2 left now. Then she added, well, using the enchantment will make things easier, as it seemed impossible to make Lee Seong-hyun behave himself. After that, she looked at them and said, in a little while, Chairman will come with 6 criminals. Get ready as soon as they arrive. They said yes. After tying Lee Seong-hyun to the chair and covering his face with a black bag, they placed a cell phone camera on a stand in front. Yamti inquired, is everything set? One said, yes. With a press of a button, we can start streaming live on YouTube. She smiled and said, good. Then one inquired, Yamti, what about the criminals? She replied, Chairman will bring them here soon. Just wait a little longer. At that moment, the door opened, and everyone's attention focused on it. However, the expectant expressions soon turned to disappointment. The person who entered was not the chairman, but Lostyak, or our boy Ryu. Yamti inquired, why did you come here? Shouldn't someone be watching over there? Could it be that the police are already tracking us? Ryu replied, no, it's not that. She asked, then why did you come in? He replied, I got tired of just watching, and I was curious about how things would turn out. Yamti, who sighed in disbelief, suddenly opened her eyes wide and said, hey, Lostyak, do you have any idea how important today is? Ryu said, yes, she said, but why are you acting like an idiot? I told you to keep watch. We need to finish the performance before the police arrive, he inquired. Before the criminals we recruited arrive, you mean? She replied, that's right, but Chairman isn't here. Ryu smiled and said, true. Why isn't the chairman coming? Yamti felt something was off. Lostyak's atmosphere was subtly different from before, and she asked him, did you just use informal language with me? Ryu nonchalantly replied, yeah. She asked angrily, did you forget that I'm your senior? Ryu shrugged. his tone indifferent, and said, "Seniority doesn't mean much in this world." Yamti chuckled wryly, realizing the futility of arguing, and said, "Ha, you've really lost it now, haven't you?" But Yamti decided to set aside their linguistic disagreement for the time being, given the pressing situation, and said, "For now, let's put that aside because of the urgency. We can discuss it later, formally with the chairman." Ryu, however, didn't let the matter go, and asked, "So why isn't the chairman showing up in this urgent situation?" Yamti glanced at the cabin's wall clock, her brows furrowing, and asked herself, why isn't he showing up at this time? It was already the time when 6 ordinary criminal members should have arrived. Yamti couldn't fathom why the chairman was disobeying her orders. He would have shown up even if it meant sacrificing his own life. And when her anxiety increased, Yamti picked up her phone and dialed the chairman's number, and she muttered under her breath, "Why the hell aren't you answering the phone, fuck?" Ryu raised an eyebrow, catching her unintended expletive, and inquired, "Are you cursing at the chairman right now?" Embarrassed, Yamti stammered and said, "Oh, I was just talking to myself." Ryu, unfazed, remarked, "Oh, but you're completely clueless." Yamti was taken aback and inquired, "What?" Ryu's tone was mocking, and he said, "I did this much and you still haven't caught on?" Yamti lowered the phone, her expression now a mix of bewilderment and irritation, and inquired, "What are you trying to do?" Ryu said, "What do you mean?" She inquired, "Is the chairman not showing up because of you?" Ryu's response was less than courteous, as he said, "You seriously have no clue. You're only realizing it now." Yamti abandoned her formal language, growing increasingly exasperated, and said, "Hey, what's wrong with you? Where's he?" Ryu said, "Huh? Are you seriously using informal language with the chairman again? It's as if he's your subordinate?" Yamti said angrily, "What kind of day is it today? Why is everyone acting like this? Do they really underestimate me just because I'm a woman?" She couldn't hold back any longer. The traitor who had disrupted all their plans stood before her. Then she demanded, locking eyes with Lost Yak, and said, "Look at me properly. A bastard like you should have been screened out a long time ago. Ah, it's my mistake. Really." She sighed, her voice tinged with regret. With an almost resigned air, she activated the enchantment and said, "Hey, where's the chairman? Tell me now and speak properly." But Ryu's response caught her off guard. As he inquired, "Why should I?" Yamti was momentarily stunned and asked, "What did you say?" Ryu replied, "I said, why should I answer you, bitch?" In fact, Ryu's brazenness knew no bounds. Yamti was left speechless, her frustration palpable. She couldn't help but feel stunned, as if she had been hit in the back of the head with a hammer. She had seduced dozens of men, but this was the first time someone reacted this way. Then she said to herself, "This is strange. I'm sure I've used it correctly. Could it be that the Lost Yak is not a man as it appears, or has the slot already been filled up? No. There are definitely 2 slots left." Yamti ordered again for confirmation. "Where is the chairman?" Ryu continued to provoke her, and said, "Why do you keep giving me orders, you crazy bitch?" As Yamti opened her eyes in disbelief, a message she had overlooked for a moment appeared in her vision. A powerful mental barrier is blocking the enchantment. You can't seduce the player, Black Scythe. Yamti couldn't help but be surprised by something other than the fact that the enchantment didn't work, and she said to herself, "What? It's not Lost Yak, but Black Scythe." In fact, the rune of enchantment is a deceptive rune. Regardless of a player's level or the heights of human renown they may reach, this rune entraps them without fail. And in the presence of Yamti, everyone is compelled to bow their heads. But now, it's not working. No matter how many times she tried, no matter how intently she gazed and attempted to bewitch, all that awaited her were messages indicating that her rune was stopped by an unyielding mental barrier. Then she asked herself, why doesn't it work? Why? Yamti found herself not only pondering this puzzle, but also something else, her opponent's nickname, revealed in the messages, Black Scythe. And she said to herself, is the person standing before me now not Lost Yak, but Black Scythe? It turned out that the identity of the Lost Yak I had known all along was, in fact, Black Scythe. And who would have imagined that Black Scythe, the top priority recruit, would be right by my side? Then Yamti stuttered, trying to say something. You, Ryu interrupted her with an evil smile and said, oh, did you notice? My nickname. It's quite the cunning rune, isn't it? It even exposes real nicknames. She inquired, how do you know about my rune? In an instant, Ryu's gaze turned ice cold and said, I've told you many times. Why do I have to respond to your questions? At that moment, a gulp echoed in the tense silence, and under the weight of this tension, Yamti observed Ryu in silence for a while, and she said to herself, a man who cannot be enchanted. That's Black Scythe. In fact, since becoming a player, he was the first man to make Yamti this nervous. Then she said to herself, what should I do now? Judging by the atmosphere, he's not doing this with good purpose. But considering that the chairman's name still lingered on the enchantment list, it appeared that he hadn't killed him yet. And he must want something since he's not killing me right away. But it couldn't be resolved through sheer force. After all, her opponent was the renowned Black Scythe, so somehow she had to solve this through conversation. With the thought that perhaps, if she handled it well, she could work things out, Yamti made a proposition and said, Black Scythe, if you tell me what you want, I'll do my best to accommodate it. But suddenly, one of the executives asked Yamti Nim, do you have any issues? Sensing that something was amiss in the atmosphere, the executives drew near. They had strategically positioned themselves, ready for any scenario to make a favorable impression on Yamti. In an instant, Ryu smiled and said, look at these idiots. But Yamti sensed a peculiar aura from that smile. Then one said, Yamti Nim, is something troubling you? If you inform us of the situation, we can... Yamti interrupted him and said angrily, shut up. You lot are getting in the way, so stay quiet. Ryu smiled and said, these guys are rather sharp. They could sense the mood better than you, and they may not grasp the topic, but they know how to read the atmosphere. And in the blink of an eye, Ryu drew his scythe. Then there was a sound as if something was being sliced one by one, and the three executives who had been standing moments ago collapsed like a row of dominoes. At that moment, blood stained the floor, but Yamti was oddly nailed in her place, and she said to herself, I didn't even see it happen. Realizing that she couldn't react at the necessary speed, Yamti let go of any hope she had, and said to herself, I have no choice. I can't come up with any plan to deal with this man. Then she gazed to Ryu and asked, What do you want? Ryu replied, First, release Congressman Seong-Hyun Lee from the enchantment. In fact, if she releases the enchantment, she will no longer be able to utilize him again. That fact was what held Yamti back. And she gathered her courage and inquired, If I refuse? But suddenly, she lost her arm. Naturally, she didn't see when it was severed. Then Ryu said, Courage may be a virtual concept, but you've misjudged your opponent. I'm not here to entertain denials. After that, Ryu picked up the severed arm from the ground and placed it against the cleanly cut section. And when Ryu Min used healing magic, the wound was mended and her arm returned to its original state. Then Ryu said, It won't be quite the same as before, but you can manage to move it. Yamti found herself quietly astonished, as reattaching a severed arm was no small feat. Even with her own emergency healing skills, she knew she lacked the recovery capacity to reattach a severed limb, and she asked herself, how is this even possible? Both of us possess the same skill, so why was there such a gap in our recovery abilities? Then Ryu, as if cautioning against entertaining doubts, once again raised his scythe and said, Now that the arm is reattached, let me repeat. Release Congressman Seong-Hyun Lee from the enchantment. Without hesitation, Yamti took action and said, I've released him. Ryu silently scrutinized Yamti upon hearing those words, and reading her inner thoughts, there was no falsehood. Then he said, That was quick. As evidence, Congressman Seong-Hyun Lee, who had been as motionless as a doll just a moment ago, let out a sigh, and he said, Ah, my head, huh? And he shouted, Hey, all of you, you know that the police are nearby. How could you kidnap a member of the National Assembly without thinking this through? You've made a mistake. Listen to me. Release me, do you understand? At that moment, Ryu said to him, Hello, Congressman Seong-Hyun Lee. I'm someone trying to rescue you. And he added, Just wait a little. I'll negotiate with that woman first. Then Ryu glared at Yamti and asked, Do you want to be spared? She replied, Please spare me. Ryu inquired, If I spare you, will you promise not to use your abilities anymore? Yamti replied, Yes, I swear to never use my abilities again. I swear to God. Ryu said coldly, Don't swear to some god. Swear to me. She said, Oh, all right. I swear to Black Scythe. I swear. Watching Yamti, who spoke with desperation in her tone, Ryu nodded and said, Very well. I'll show you mercy. Now, be on your way. Even with the invitation she desired, Yamti still regarded Ryu with suspicious eyes and inquired, "Can I really go now? You won't cut my throat as soon as I turn around, will you?" Ryu said, "Don't be silly. Go." Then he turned his head indifferently. At that moment, Satan whispered to her, saying, "He's defenseless. You can attack him from behind." For a moment, she had the impulse to launch a surprise attack, but it was just a fleeting thought, and she said to herself, "No, no, am I insane? Was it necessary to risk my life for something like vengeance?" And compared to Black Scythe, my stats were utterly insignificant, and the gap between us was akin to that between an elephant and a mouse. No matter how sudden the attack, there was almost no chance of winning, and she knew it well, and she said to Ryu, "I'll go." Black Scythe. "I'll be on my way then." But suddenly, Congressman Seong-Hyun Lee shouted, "Where do you think you're going, you fucking bitch?" And he said to Ryu, "Untie me! I have to catch that woman. She kidnapped me." Even though he was screaming so loudly, Ryu made no move to release him, and he said to Yamti, "Hurry up and go." For a moment, Yamti, casting a suspicious glance at Ryu, left the cabin. As she descended the mountain path, her breathing grew labored. Then Yamti, who had come down a considerable distance, turned to look back. The cabin was already so far away that it couldn't be seen, and she said to herself, "He's not following me, is he? Is he really letting me go?" It is neither visible nor detected by the common skill presence detection, and Yamti was sure that there was no pursuit. She laughed, but she bit her lip to stop herself from laughing aloud, in case it would be heard by Black Scythe. But she couldn't hold back the laughter bubbling up, and said, "What's going on, seriously? Does he actually like me? What on earth? Why did he spare me? Was it because of the promise not to use my ability? Or was it because I appeared frail? Or, have you fallen in love with my beauty or something?" Then she added, "Whatever it is, you're so naive, and believing in mere words was really a naive act. And I've encountered countless men, but never one like this." In fact, Yamti had met her fair share of suckers, but this one took the cake, and she said, "What a sucker. Promises, oaths, it's for losers. Why should I bother keeping them?" From the beginning, Yamti had no intention of honoring her promise. It was simply a matter of saying what she needed to say in order to survive. And as for the guy who fell for it, well, he was a sucker, a fool. Then Yamti walked more, and after confirming that there was no one around, she did. Yamti let out a sigh of relief and said, "I narrowly escaped death. I never thought I'd encounter a human in this world who wasn't captivated by me, and it was Black Scythe, out of all people." Then she added, "Besides, if Lost Yak was indeed Black Scythe, that means he hid his true identity and patiently waited for the right moment to strike, catching us off guard, right?" And the more she thought about it, the more terrifying Black Scythe seemed. And Yamti said, "The kidnapping operation may have failed, but there's no need to dwell on it. Where would I be now if not for the softness of Black Scythe?" And surprisingly, thanks to Black Scythe's naiveness, I weren't currently crossing the treacherous Sandokan River. Then she inquired, "Could it be that he's secretly the type who's weak for women? If that's the case, I should have seriously tried to seduce him when we're together in the cafe. In fact, the enchantment on the chairman still hadn't been lifted, so she could use the chairman to control the cafe once more whenever she desired." And she said, "At least he's alive, and as long as he's alive, I can plan for what comes next." With that thought in mind, Yamti was about to descend the mountain once again, but suddenly her detection skill picked up on a presence. Yamti reflexively turned her head, and she had every reason to be terrified, because the Grim Reaper was right in front of her, and she inquired in shock, "You, Black Scythe?" Ryu smiled and said, "As expected, you're not a trustworthy woman," she said in fear. Black Scythe, "Why are you suddenly saying such things? I think there's a misunderstanding," Ryu said. "I heard it all. You were muttering to yourself." Yamti momentarily thought that Black Scythe had come just looking for her. She hoped he hadn't heard anything. Then Ryu said coldly, "I heard everything, even your mockery about me being a sucker. Your laughter sounded eerier than that of an angel." Yamti remained silent and could not utter a word. Ryu added, "You still don't believe, huh? Or do you refuse to believe? Well, it doesn't matter. I've confirmed that you're a woman who can't be trusted." As Black Scythe approached, Yamti grew desperate, and she said, "Wait a minute. If you're going to kill me, please reconsider. Even though I look like this, I have various uses, I promise. Ryu inquired. You promise? And without giving her a chance to respond, Ryu smiled evilly and said, promises are for losers. Yamti swallowed hard and said to herself, since he mentioned these particular words, he had definitely overheard her. Then Ryu asked, and who said I was going to kill you anyway? She inquired. Excuse me? Ryu smiled and said, you have a good ability like the rune of enchantment. It would be a waste to kill you, she inquired. Then Yamti couldn't say anything more. At that moment, Ryu used domination and ordered, Yamti, become my slave. In fact, before Yamti kidnapped the congressman, Ryu found himself a bit puzzled. He was pondering when the right time would be to rescue Congressman Lee Seong-hyun. His conclusion, perhaps it was best to save him after the kidnapping had occurred. And Ryu had a particular strategy in mind. He figured that dealing with Yamti and the rest of the miscreants prematurely might not be the wisest move. Who would appreciate his efforts if no one even knew about the kidnapping? This situation presented an opportunity, a golden chance to thrust the name of the enigmatic Black Scythe into the public's awareness. While Black Scythe was a renowned entity among players, it was virtually unknown to the general populace. In fact, some voices in the public sphere were quick to criticize players as a whole, and among those voices stood Congressman Lee Seong-hyun, leading the charge against criminal players. Yet Ryu, having built a friendship with him in the past, understood the congressman better than most. He knew the hardships his one and only son had endured and the complex feelings he harbored towards players. This insight enabled Ryu Min to grasp the nuances of the situation better than anyone else and discern the right course of action. And Ryu said, it's imperative to change Congressman Lee Seong-hyun's perspective, and he aimed to make people see that not all players were villains. He wanted to demonstrate that utilizing the abilities of players for noble purposes was an opportunity too good to pass up. You might ask, why? Well, in fact, Ryu had a vision. He foresaw a day when he would stand as the representative of players, and he knew that securing the support of the general public was crucial for this endeavor. And if Congressman Lee Seong-hyun came to his aid, Ryu believed that ordinary citizens would readily rally behind Black Scythe. Consequently, he bided his time, refraining from taking action until the kidnapping unfolded. So Ryu's decision to use the invisibility skill and tail the chairman stemmed from this understanding. At that time, the president met with the criminals, and one of them asked, Hey there, boss. Are you seriously tripling our payment once the job's done? He replied, Indeed. Suspicion crept in, and one of the criminals asked cautiously, You're not planning to scam us at the last minute, are you? He reassured them, If you can't do it, just say so now. I'll transfer the 25 million won to someone else. One said, You're quite impatient. I was just asking a question. When have we ever said we wouldn't do it? So don't worry. In today's world, taking a life is hardly a big deal. Ryu couldn't help but sigh at the realization. Whether they were players or regular folks, there always seemed to be trash lurking around. With such thoughts in mind, Ryu patiently awaited the opportune moment. Then suddenly, a soft chime signaled that the time had come. It was a call for the president. Yes, Yamti-nim, Song Jae-gyum responded. I understand. I'll take him now. Upon ending the call, the president directed his bodyguards, Gather everyone here and follow me. The bodyguards acknowledged the order, but before they could react further, they faltered and collapsed, much to their shock. One of them managed to groan before losing consciousness. What's happening? Ryu had swiftly dealt with them, leaving the president and the criminals dumbfounded. Song Jae-gyum, who recognized Ryu Min's face, was especially taken aback. Lost yak? With a grin, Ryu quipped, Well, now it's your turn to faint, Chairman. And in an instant, the president joined the ranks of the unconscious, and Ryu turned his attention to the bewildered criminals and inquired, Now, what should we do with you lot? One of them managed to say, realizing that Ryu was no ordinary human. Hey, a player! You can never hope to win against one of them. Realizing that he couldn't simply let those who conspired to commit murder walk away, Ryu unsheathed his scythe. In an instant, the 6 criminals were reduced to a gruesome scene of crimson splatter. Then Ryu, who quickly cleaned up the scene to eliminate all traces, drove off with the unconscious chairman. Carefully placing the body as if it were a discarded object, he had a plan in mind, and he said, Even if the chairman wakes up later, it won't matter. By then, the situation will be firmly under control. After that, Ryu steered the car towards their designated rendezvous point. an old cabin. Upon entering, he was greeted by 3 junior officers who recognized him. They respectfully nodded, saying, "Hello, senior," Ryu inquired. "Hey there. Has Yamti-Nim arrived yet?" They replied, "Yes, she's expected to arrive with the congressman shortly." Ryu added, "All right then, I'll maintain my watch outside as planned." While Ryu was outside, he noticed Yamti's arrival with the congressman, and he said to himself, "Finally, they're here." From this point on, the plan was clear-cut. Get inside, rescue the congressman, and eliminate all officers except Yamti. Why spare Yamti's life? The reason was simple. If Ryu can enslave Yamti, Player Haven will naturally fall under his control. Though the chairman was the nominal leader of Player Haven, Yamti wielded the real power behind the scenes. And Ryu believed that if he could control Yamti, he could effectively steer the organization. But there was more at stake. Ryu coveted the enticing rune of enchantment. This rune held immense power, perhaps even surpassing that of a territory representative's authority. And Ryu said to himself, "It's superior. It knows no boundaries, dominating players and regular individuals alike." However, Ryu had struggled to approach Yamti until now. How could he compete with someone who could captivate people effortlessly? Then he said, "Of course, ending her wouldn't be difficult. I could sneak up invisibly and finish the job swiftly." But from the start, Ryu had never intended to kill Yamti. It was more practical to utilize her. And he said, "That's why I needed the 7th round submission rune." Thanks to the rune of mental barrier, Ryu Min could finally confront Yamti. The rune of enchantment might be powerful, but it can't pierce through the rune of mental barrier. However, to avoid any misunderstandings in front of the congressman, Ryu decided to lure Yamti outside, and he said to himself, "I'll make him think I spared her out of mercy." Seeing Yamti's scornful expression, Ryu was sure of one thing: mere threats couldn't control people. And he said, "In that case, there's only one way," and he decided to use the one-time use reality's dominion on Yamti, and said to himself, "I'm not sorry to see it go. Dominating Yamti will grant me another authority anyway, if not a better one without the restrictions." And when Ryu ordered, "Yamti, become my slave," a message appeared. All uses of real-world's dominion have been exhausted. Temporary skill, dominion. Remaining uses, 8. Targets, Black Scythe, Yamti. Unused authority can be employed in the other world. Temporary skill. Dominion is hidden from the skill window. With this, Ryu not only gained access to the potent rune of enchantment, but also control over Player Haven. Yamti said, bowing slightly, "It's an honor to meet you, Master. Please give me an order, Master." "I will do whatever you tell me," Ryu instructed. "Never call me Master. Don't bow to me in front of anyone else either. Just act naturally, because if you get too carried away with your words, someone might find it strange," she said. "All right." Although Yamti didn't add another word, Ryu could read her inner thoughts, and he said to himself, "She genuinely sees me as his master. She's completely under my control." Then Ryu ordered, "Run down this path as fast as you can. The police will arrive soon. Tell the chairman that Lost Yak betrayed him." She said, "All right. Master, I mean, Black Scythe?" Ryu said coldly, "Don't even mention Black Scythe. I will kill you." She said, "Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. But what should I call you from now on?" At that moment, Ryu revealed his true face and smiled, saying, "Just use my name, Ryu Min." He was sure that his identity would not be revealed, as Yamti had become his slave. On the other hand, Lee Seong-hyun said to himself, "I can't believe I was kidnapped." Recalling his memories before passing out, the conversation with the woman who brought him here, and being bound to the chair, all signs pointed to a kidnapping. And he said, "That woman, she's the one who kidnapped me. She was undoubtedly a player. Probably retaliating for the law I proposed." Then he added, "Wasn't that why I hired bodyguards to begin with? But those bodyguards are utterly useless, worthless." Then he remembered the person who saved him and inquired. "He introduced himself earlier as someone coming to rescue me, but what's his connection to that woman?" The atmosphere didn't suggest they were on the same side. After all, she was begging for her life. However, that alone couldn't confirm him as an ally. So Lee Seong-hyun kept a watchful eye, and he said to himself, "He's probably not an ordinary person but a player." But suddenly Ryu approached Lee Seong-hyun and tear the rope, and said, "Sorry for the delay in untying you, Congressman Lee Seong-hyun. I had to tie up some loose ends outside." He inquired, "Loose ends? You mean that woman?" Ryu replied, "Yes. As you've shared, She is indeed the one responsible for your kidnapping. I've taken care of her, so you need not worry. Lee Seong-hyun scrutinized him with a probing gaze. Seeing that, Ryu said, "You must be curious about the situation. I'll explain everything. First, let's get rid of the body." And with the use of erase traces, the bodies vanished. Lee Seong-hyun was initially surprised by this ability, but he quickly regained his composure, and he said, "You, a player," Ryu said. "Yes, I know you might not hold players in high regard, but you seem a bit disappointed by your savior," he inquired. "So you're the one who saved my life?" Ryu nodded and proceeded to explain the situation in detail, saying, "As you may have guessed, there are many players who hold grievances against you, Congressman. The group here is one of them." Ryu artfully wove a narrative, skillfully blending elements of truth and deception. He chose not to overtly involve Player Haven in the scheme, and he added, "I received an offer from a player I typically associate with. Consequently, I came to know their plan," and with intricate detail, he explained the plan, right down to the schedule and route they had followed. Lee Seong-hyun's eyes widened as he listened. "The level of detail in your story makes it appear genuine." Then Ryu said, "I harbored no ill feelings toward you, Congressman. I didn't harbor any negative opinions about the law you proposed. In fact, I regarded it as a necessary legislation for our current era." Lee Seong-hyun felt an unusual sense of unease. Before him was a player who supported the law, in stark contrast to his own disdain for players. Ryu added, "So I betrayed them because I didn't want someone like you to perish in vain." Lee Seong-hyun inquired, "The bodies I saw earlier?" Ryu replied, "Yes, they were players who had conspired in the crime. I eliminated them all. If you wish to know their identities, I can provide that information." And Ryu continued saying, "To you, I must seem like a murderer. Well, I am a murderer, but I have no intention of surrendering." He said, "Why not? If you've committed a crime, you should turn yourself in." Ryu inquired, "I can't imagine that you'd want the man who saved you to spend the rest of my life behind bars, right?" Yes. Turning him to the police was something even Lee Seong-hyun couldn't force himself to do. Despite this young man being a player he held in hatred, he was still the person who saved his life. Then he asked, "What do you desire from me? If you expect me to revoke the law as compensation for saving me, that's utterly..." Ryu said, "Please proceed with the law. Maintain your current perspective. That's all I request." Frankly, Lee Seong-hyun was taken aback. It was the opposite of what he had anticipated. And he said, "If that's all, is there anything else?" Ryu said, "I desire nothing more. I acted according to my convictions, and like I said before, I don't oppose your law." For some reason, Lee Seong-hyun felt a sense of embarrassment, and he said, "In any case, thank you. You saved me, and I will find a way to return." At that moment, the sound of approaching footsteps reached their ears, and Ryu said, "It appears the police have tracked us down. I must depart." He inquired, "Just like that?" Ryu turned to leave, disregarding Lee Seong-hyun's bewildered expression, and said, "It was a pleasure talking to you. Everything you have witnessed and heard you may share with the police." But Lee Seong-hyun said, "Wait." In response to Lee Seong-hyun's call, Ryu turned his head. Then Lee Seong-hyun gazed at Ryu, as if wanting to at least know the name of the person who had rescued him, and asked, "What is your name?" With a faint smile, Ryu replied, "I am known as Black Scythe." After 3 hours, news and articles spread like wildfire. Breaking news: Lee Seong-hyun, a member of the National Assembly, kidnapped and miraculously escapes. Major player law faces crisis as MP. Lee Seong-hyun becomes a kidnapping target. The kidnappers of MP Lee identified as 4 players, and public opinion has taken a sour turn against players. This was a glaring example of players receiving a negative public image. But as news articles began to highlight that the hero who saved the congressman was a player, public sentiment started shifting. Breaking news: the hero who rescued Congressman Lee Seong-hyun is a fellow player. Meet Black Scythe. Player Black Scythe rescues Congressman Lee despite receiving a prior criminal offer. Black Scythe, a true hero who betrayed his fellow players to save Congressman Lee Seong-hyun. And the comments were as follows: "The person who saved Congressman Lee Seong-hyun is a player. This Black Scythe person is famous among players, right? He's a beast who consistently ranks #1 in every round." Whoa, really? That means he's a big deal, huh? So Black Scythe Nim made an appearance in the real world? Wow, this is huge. There's a player here too, LOL. Who even is Black Scythe? Are you his fanboy? As Yamty read through the articles, A smile spread across her face, and said, "Master, take a look at this. There are comments praising Black Scythe." Ryu inquired, "Really? Let me see." Then Ryu took Yamti's phone and scanned the comments, and said to himself, "Who would have thought my reputation would soar just because I helped someone once? And I'll gradually build up my name value. There's no need to rush." Then Ryu smiled and handed the phone back to Yamti. She said, "Thank you, master." And she added, "I'll serve you as my master for the rest of my life." Ryu said to himself, "It seems that different people have varying levels of willingness to accept requests." Even though Ryu had told her not to, Yamti kept accidentally calling him master. And he asked himself, could it be because of the command to become a slave? And if you considered yourself a slave to the core, and your owner told you to use informal language, could you easily comply? Despite her efforts, the errors stemmed from viewing Ryu as her master. This led Ryu to reluctantly let her call him master again. And he said to himself, "I always found informal speech uncomfortable, so this works out as well." Externally, Ryu appeared to be a mere 20 years old, but he had lived well over a century. And if we consider the time he has lived, these guys are practically his grandkids. Although Ryu, gazing at Yamti, felt the need to caution her once more. And he said, "Remember, you can call me master when we're alone, but what about in public?" She said, "I should call you Ryu Min and drop the formalities, right?" Ryu added, "Exactly. Keep that in mind, and forget that I'm the Black Scythe." She said, "Yes, master." Then Ryu inquired, "Did you speak to the chairman as I instructed?" She replied, "Yes. I explained that the plan's failure was due to Lost Yak's betrayal, as you said. He accepted it readily." Ryu Min nodded in approval. Blaming the betrayal on Lost Yak fit the narrative perfectly, since he had attacked the chairman in Lost Yak's image, and he asked, "Did you also pass on the other message I gave?" She replied, "Yes. As of July 9th, we've agreed to replace the murder tests with ones focusing on character." Ryu said, "Good. With the change in regime, it's time to set things right. And if someone applies to the cafe, have the chairman check their criminal record first. Reject anyone with even a hint of an issue." Yamti said, "Understood." Then Ryu inquired, "The interviews are sorted, but the real challenge is dealing with the current members. How many are left?" She replied, "Over half died last round, leaving about 4,000. He inquired, "They all passed the murder tests?" Yamti said, "Yes. They all participated in or witnessed murder." Ryu added, "These are the ones who aren't even worth killing. Deciding their fate is the real issue." Then a sly smile crossed Ryu's face as he pondered, and said, "Let's leave the trash to the janitor." On the other hand, aged man Noge rarely used his phone, but now he was absorbed in his phone like never before, and his fingers flew across the screen, commenting on every article about the Black Scythe. He wrote a comment, "The Black Scythe has emerged. Wow, incredible." But he saw a derogatory comment. "Who's even this fucker Black Scythe? Are you his fanboy?" Aged man Noge instantly responded to the disparaging remarks, and wrote, "Ignorance at its finest, not knowing the great Black Scythe. Every player knows him. Tisk, tisk." The other person wrote, "What does that matter, kid? To the average person, he's just a nobody." He wrote, "You don't know how great he is, you fool." The other person wrote, "Ha ha. Resorting to insults when logic fails? Pathetic, ha-ha." Aged man Noge was now embroiled in his 5th keyboard war. He was on the brink of fury, and said to himself, "The fools don't understand the Black Scythe's greatness." Though aged man Noge clicked his tongue in frustration, he knew deep down that to the common people, the Black Scythe was just a character in a lesser-known game. And he inquired, "What to do? How can I make them understand?" He was troubled, yet the answer seemed evident. Wasn't he the visionary behind the idea of creating a cult devoted to the Black Scythe? And he said, "To make this a reality, I'll need to gather followers." Building a cult single-handedly was a daunting task. He required allies, individuals who would echo his voice, financial issues aside for the moment, and he said, "I must seek out those eager to establish a gathering in honor of the Black Scythe." But where to begin this quest? The solution was already forming in his mind, and he smiled and said, "To catch fish, one must go to the river." After that, time marched on to August 1st. A crowd of approximately 2,000 players had convened. The 8th round was underway, and Minjuri approached Ryu and said, "Black Scythe Nim." Ryu said, "You found me quickly." She said, "Indeed. With the tracking skill, it was a breeze." Minjuri halted, suddenly aware of her slip-up. Ryu inquired. But the tracking skill wasn't included in the set I advised you to learn, was it? Minjuri laughed, but she was unable to confess that she had acquired the tracking skill specifically to meet the black side. Interestingly, Aged Man No Gay had learned it for a similar reason, and he approached Ryu with a cautious air and said, "Hello, Lord Blackside." Ryu said to himself, "Did he too?" And his eyebrows arched slightly. Everyone seemed to be investing in silly skills instead of the practical ones he had suggested. But suddenly, Ryu recalled something about Aged Man No Gay at that moment, and said to himself, "He's a recent applicant to Player Haven, right?" It appeared he had joined as part of his campaign to build a cult for Black Scythe. His recent membership distinguished him from the others who had passed the murder test. Then Ryu contemplated downgrading the grades of the existing members, giving preferential treatment to the newer ones, and said to himself, "The old members might revolt, but it's irrelevant. They're destined for the janitor anyway." Ryu, smirking at his plan, was greeted by Minjuri's cheerful demeanor, and she inquired, "Oh, Black Scythe Nim, did you catch the news? You were the hero who rescued Congressman Lee Seong-hyun, weren't you?" Ryu replied, "Oh yes, that." And our boy Aged Man No Gay got on the line with a smile and said, "I saw that too, Lord Black Scythe. I was so excited that I left supportive comments on every article about you." Observing Aged Man No Gay's unusually bright smile, Ryu couldn't bring himself to scold him for his seemingly useless efforts. Then Aged Man No Gay said, "But really, it's incredible. The articles mentioned the criminals invited you to conspire with them, right?" Ryu replied, "Yes, they did." He added, "How could they dare to make such an offer? And what were they thinking? Challenging the Black Scythe?" Ryu said, "They didn't know it was me." At that moment, both Aged Man No Gay and Minjuri shared a thought. "I wish I knew Black Scythe's true identity." Hearing their thoughts, Ryu inwardly shook his head and then looked upward, and suddenly a figure shimmered into view above them. It was an angel, and the angel said, "Welcome everyone, I'm Ariel, newly assigned to supervise the C2 ESKA 003 zone. No applause is necessary." When the crowd remained silent, not clapping, Ariel's eyes narrowed slightly, and said, "I thought at least one of you would clap. That's quite disappointing." Then some players clapped. As a few claps broke the silence, Ariel's expression softened into a smile, and said, "Thank you for the welcome. Now, shall we dive into the quest for the 8th round?" Then the system message appeared. Round 8. Escort the guild to their destination. Punish the traitor. Reward upon success. Previous zone. Participants: 3,047,910. Achievers: 0/1,523,955. Current Zone C2 ESKA 003. Participants: 2,166. Achievers: 0/1083. As the players delved into the quest details, their intrigue grew, and one inquired, "Escort the guild to the destination? Why is the term guild suddenly thrown in?" Another asked, "Where can we find this guild?" Another said, "A group of merchants is called a guild, but for a guild to exist, shouldn't there be merchants first? Is this some sort of role-play scenario?" Amidst the puzzled chatter, laughter burst forth from the angel's lips, and said, "Role-play? Haha, we're not asking you to do that, we wouldn't dare." Then one player inquired, "So what exactly does it entail?" The angel replied, "Literally just escorting the guild." Another player asked, "So where can we locate this guild?" The angel replied, "Humans may have a reputation for being inferior, but I never imagined you were this clueless." In the face of the angel's mockery, the players fell into contemplative silence. Then the angel added, "Do you all think you're the sole inhabitants of this world? Goblins, angels, gnolls, orcs, and other races, haven't you encountered them already?" Someone said in shock, "Ah, no way." He seemed to understand what the angel meant. The angel said, "Yes, these guilds hail from different realms. There are 3 races of guild in total: Human Guild, Elf Guild, and Dwarf Guild. You'll need to pick one and serve as their escort." One inquired, "We get to choose which race to escort. Do elves and dwarves also have their guilds?" another said. Well, setting that aside, are you suggesting that the elves we've only read about in novels actually exist? Then the angel added, the escort mission will last for 5 hours. If you successfully deliver the guild to their destination without harm, the quest will be considered complete. Naturally, you'll face monsters during the journey, but don't fret. You won't be alone. One inquired, we won't be alone? Are we forming parties like we did in the 6th round? The angel replied, yes. Today you'll be forming large parties, which is quite existing. The 2,166 players here will be divided among the 3 guilds, and you must choose just one guild. If you choose the same guild as someone else, you'll automatically form a party with them. Of course, you won't know others' choices. One player said, will we all be moving together with a common goal of protecting the guild? It feels somewhat like joining on a raid in a video game. The angel added, by the way, each guild has a different difficulty level, so choose carefully. We won't reveal which one is harder. At this time, Ariel provided an explanation for the subquest and said, as you can see, the subquest revolves around uncovering the traitor. Within the guild you've selected, there will be at least a traitor. We're unsure if it's a single individual or a group. One inquired, there's a traitor. While we're escorting them, the traitor is with us? Is this akin to the mafia game? The angel added, the traitor's objective is to stop the guild from reaching their destination. Naturally, the traitor isn't part of your party. You can attack them with your skills or any means necessary. They can be eliminated. And if you successfully locate and dispatch the concealed traitor, you'll receive a reward for the subquest. Of course, the reward will be granted to the individual who contributes the most. Nods of understanding rippled through the crowd. With this explanation, they now had a clearer picture of what lay ahead. Then the angel laughed and said, the explanation concludes here. The mission will start in 10 minutes after you've selected your guild. Best of luck to everyone. The angel's departure set off a buzz among the onlookers, and one inquired, choosing 1 out of 3, huh? I guess we should aim for lower difficulty. Another said, maybe going with the elf guild is the easier path. One added, I'm leaning towards the human guild. Other races might be too intimidating. The conversations about the quest were buzzing, and Min Jury joined in and asked, Black Scythe, we have to pick one of the 3 races, right? Ryu replied, yes. In fact, Ryu had a hunch about which one would be the most popular, and he said, most folks will probably flock to human, then elf, and finally dwarf. Humans were familiar and comfortable for most, given their shared race. Elves attracted those who had always dreamed of meeting them in the flesh. As for dwarves, they didn't seem as appealing, evoking images of elderly mountain dwellers. And Ryu added, if I had to choose, I'd go with the dwarves. Having been through multiple rounds, Ryu was well aware of the different difficulty levels associated with each. Dwarf is the easiest, followed by elf, and then human. In other words, the place with the most participants was also the most challenging, and it also contains stronger monsters of a higher level. So if you want an easier time passing the round, the dwarf option is the way to go. In fact, the main quest primarily involves escorting the guild, but just escorting it doesn't guarantee passing the mission, and escorting is the basic requirement for the round clearance, but it doesn't mean you'll pass just by doing that. Rankings are determined based on the order in which individuals acquire the most contribution. At first glance, it may seem like a party quest where everyone escorts the guild together, but in reality, survival is decided by each individual's performance. And Ryu said to himself, if the monsters are weak, you can receive a higher contribution, so it's better to focus on the dwarf guild, which has a lower difficulty level, to secure a higher ranking. Aged man no gay might not have known this fact, but Min Jury did. Then Ryu said to himself, I've provided all this information to her through my prophecies. However, Min Jury seemed to be in deep thought, and the reason was quite simple. As the dwarf guild has a lower difficulty level, because of that fact, the monsters are weak, which means fewer experience points. And, on the flip side, higher difficulty zones offered tougher challenges and higher XP rewards. So it's a choice between low risk and low reward, or high risk and high reward. And she said to herself, I know dwarves are low difficulty, but if I tackle a place that's too easy, my level won't increase much. Then what if the gap between Black Scythe and me widens? Ryu could sense her concern, and he said to himself, unnecessary worries. Even with a low level, Bless provided a substantial buff. In fact, Ryu's hope was for her to survive as long as possible. Then Ryu said to her, "Democracy," she inquired. "Yes?" Ryu asked. "Why are you so deep in thought?" She replied. "Oh, it's nothing," Ryu added. "I might not know what's on your mind, but remember this. Greed can lead to trouble. Try to stay alive for as long as possible. It's a path that benefits you, me, and everyone else around us." Minjuri was taken aback. It felt like he had spoken as if he had her situation in mind. And she asked herself, can he actually read people's minds? And she added, maybe this time I'll take the easier route. When he delved into Minjuri's thoughts, it seemed she had settled on the dwarf guild. And he said to himself, if I had known, I would have strongly recommended going for the Dwarf Guild. Aged Man No Gay was also pondering, but in the end, it seemed he had decided on the Elf Guild. Then Ryu said to himself, Heavenly Demon and Sang Cheol, Seo Arin, Russell, Christine, and the others will decide for themselves. Some would aim for easier places, while others would be greedy and go for the human guild. But anyway, my prophecy should be helpful. I've told them all about the advantages and how to deal with monsters for each guild. However, there was one thing he hadn't mentioned, subquests. He had avoided discussing them. A while later, after 10 minutes, a message appeared in everyone's view. Guild selection begins. Please touch the guild you want to escort. 1. Human Guild. 2. Elf Guild. 3. Dwarf Guild. Then one player said, Whatever happens, happens. I'm going for number 1 since it's what I want. Another smiled and said, Let's see how the elves look. Number 2. As soon as they chose their guild, the players disappeared as if they had been teleported somewhere. Then Minjuri said, Black Scythe, I'm going for the Dwarf Guild. Want to come with me? Ryu shook his head at Minjuri's suggestion and said, Never mind. You go first. Although Minjuri knew about the difficulty levels, she kept her words to herself. She didn't want to endanger Ryu Min by revealing the prophecy, and she said to herself, Black Scythe will probably choose on his own anyway. And before Minjuri made her selection, she bid farewell and said, Black Scythe, I don't know where you'll choose, but I hope you have a good outcome. We might not see each other again, so I'll cast a buff and leave. At that moment, a smile crept onto Ryu's lips and said to himself, You do have a sense of timing. After Minjuri disappeared following her guild selection, Aged Man No Gay also said his farewell, and when he chose number 2, he disappeared. Most people had moved on, but Ryu still hadn't made a selection. It appeared as if he was contemplating, but he had already made up his mind. Then Ryu clenched his fist, revealing his unwavering determination, and said, My choice is to choose nothing. At first glance, there seemed to be 3 choices, but in reality, there was one more, choosing nothing. Ryu hadn't known this at first, and he said to himself, I thought I had to choose one of the 3 without hesitation, and picked number 1. As he explored various strategies from numbers 1, 2, and 3, Ryu began to question the subquest. It was because the traitors were the same every time. And he inquired, what's going on? Wasn't the traitor randomly chosen among the guild? And while he pondered this question, Ryu made a mistake and missed his guild selection. That was when he realized it. Then he smiled and said, Not choosing anything is the best option. Exactly 9 minutes passed, and then an additional message appeared. 1 minute left until your remaining choice. Not making a choice may result in penalties. 10 seconds left until your choice. Hurry, 1 second left. It's really over now. You ultimately did not choose a guild. At last, the message that appeared brought a satisfied smile to Ryu's lips. Player Black Scythe has joined the traitor group. In fact, in the 8th round, the mission unfolds with 2 distinct groups taking center stage. First, there's the regular group, tasked with safeguarding the guild, and hiding within it lies a covert faction of traitors. And the primary aim of the regular group is to ensure the safe passage of the guild to their intended destination. This is the well-known main quest of the 8th round. Simultaneously, the subquest revolves around unmasking and neutralizing the traitors lurking within their midst. But if you join the traitor group, the quest will be completely different. And as expected, a new goal appeared before Ryu. Player Black Scythe joined the traitor group. Main quest and subquest are combined into one. The 8th round quest has been changed. Round 8. Objective. Hinder the guild's progress to the destination. Success. Reward. Failure. Retry with a 20% reduction in stats and debuff. 3 consecutive failures, annihilation. While the regular group aims to safeguard the guild, the traitor group's mission is diametrically opposed. Their purpose is to obstruct the guild from reaching their intended destination. This quest operates discreetly within the shadows, amidst the masses. One could even liken it to a struggle between the minority and the majority. It might sound like an impossible task. However, there's no need for Ryu to take on the entire regular group by himself. All he needs to do is prevent the guild from reaching their destination for the quest to succeed. There's no necessity to turn all players into enemies. In the end, it's only the otherworldly guild that needs to be eliminated. Then Ryu said to himself, a swift assassination of the otherworldly merchants is sufficient. But surviving the players' retaliatory onslaught after that is a different matter. But I don't feel sorry for what I'm going to do. If they discover a traitor, they will eliminate him without hesitation. For the regular group, traitors are their targets. In other words, the players are the ones who turned Ryu into their enemy. And he inquired, no, did I turn them into enemies by choosing to be the traitor? In fact, the reason Ryu didn't mention the sub-quest in his prophecy becomes evident here. Pursuing the sub-quest would be futile, and with an evil smile, Ryu said, you want to kill me, the Black Scythe, and claim the sub-quest reward? That's cute. And how would people react if they found out that you, the traitor you need to deal with, is Black Scythe? In fact, a lot of people would give up on the sub-quest without even trying it. Where Ryu currently resides is a gray space distinct from the starting point. Alongside the message that he had become a traitor, he had been transported here, with other individuals now visible in his vicinity. Then he inquired, by the way, do these people belong to the same traitor group as me? They must be people who couldn't select the guild due to running out of time. And it appears there are fewer than 30 of them. Now, whether Ryu likes it or not, they must work together as members of the traitor group to complete the mission. However, there's no obligation to cooperate if they have no intention of finishing the quest early, and it's unfortunate for them. But Ryu has no intention of concluding the quest prematurely. And what's truly crucial is that failure results in annihilation after 3 attempts. Even if they fail once or twice, it only leads to a stat debuff without any real loss. In fact, the traitor group is sequentially deployed with dwarves, elves, and human guilds. This means that failing the mission allows you to experience all of them. And Ryu added with a smile, it's an opportunity for tremendous level growth, as deliberately failing the mission and traversing each guild, hunting monsters. Not only does this yield superior experience points, but it also provides items from all 3 locations, especially the runes awarded when the reputation level is high in each guild. You will be able to monopolize it all. Ryu's plan for this 8th round revolves around obtaining 2 specific runes, the rune of durability from the dwarves and the rune of foresight from the humans. And from the elf guild, he could acquire potions, and there is one potion that Ryu is coveting. In order to achieve these goals, joining the traitor group appeared to be the best choice. However, this might not be a fortunate turn of events for the other traitors. Then Ryu smiled evilly and said, I'll do whatever it takes to ensure the quest fails. Ryu was a member of the traitor group, secretly hoping for the failure of his fellow traitors. It was a situation where he could be called a double agent. Then the angel appeared and said, it seems like all the indecisive folks who couldn't pick a guild have gathered here. And Angel Ariel, the one responsible for explaining the 8th round, appeared with an incongruous smile, saying, everyone gather here now. If not now, we won't see each other, and you should at least know each other's faces, right? As the angel fluttered her wings, the scattered players assembled. Seeing the Black Scythe, one player inquired, wow, Black Scythe. Another asked, why is Black Scythe here? No, why am I in the traitor group? The angel said. A few of you haven't grasped the situation yet, but that's why I am here, right? Then the angel explained to the players how they had become traitors. One player said, oh, it was because I didn't choose. So is everyone here because they couldn't choose a guild? While the others were still distracted by the angel's explanation, Ryu quickly counted the heads of the players gathered here, including himself. There were 29 in total, and he said to himself, right now I need to remember their faces. It'll make it easier to deal with them when I eventually betray them. And Ryu began to memorize the faces of the traitor group quickly. And if you're wondering why was Ryu memorizing faces when he could recognize them through the wristbands if they were in a party, just then the angel was explaining this very point, saying, "For those of you who have become part of the traitor group, you need to stop the guilds from reaching their destination. You can think of it as a party since you share the same quest, but in reality, it's not a party." One player inquired, "So it's not a party? Then is it solo then?" The angel laughed, replied, "Yes. While the regular group forms parties, you, as traitors, do not share experience points. It's a setting where you don't trust each other." One player said, "No. Then how are we supposed to hunt? We thought Black Scythe was in our party and were excited." A sense of disappointment was evident on the faces of the players who had secretly hoped for a party. Then the angel said, "The idea of not trusting each other was just a joke. But there are legitimate reasons for not allowing you to form a party. If one person betrays the team, the rest would suffer as well." One inquired, "What are you talking about?" The angel said, "Let's say one of the traitors acted crazy and exposed the identities of the fellow traitors on the same side. What would you do?" One player replied, "You should shut that guy up, even if it means killing him." The angel said, "That's right? But as you know, if you form a party, you can't attack each other and no damage is dealt. In other words, it's a system where if one person betrays, the rest can get rid of him." One said, "So there was a reason we couldn't be in a party. And I'm fortunate in that regard. I don't need to share hunting experience points." Ryu smiled as he had memorized all the faces of the traitor group. Now, even in real action, he would be able to identify who the traitors were. And he said to himself, "If I know who they are, dealing with them will be a piece of cake. Besides, if anything goes wrong, I can read their minds." Furthermore, there was a reason for memorizing faces instead of nicknames. The reason came from the angel herself. As the angel said, "By the way, I'll also hide everyone's nicknames. Knowing each other's nicknames would make it easier for traitors to identify each other." In short, it was a measure to prevent traitors from knowing each other's identities. One player said, "You're hiding our nicknames too? But our faces are exposed now, aren't they?" The angel said, "Nicknames are easier to remember than faces. Who could possibly memorize all of the faces in such a short period of time, like now?" Ryu smiled and said to himself, "If it were any other person, it would be true. Not me, though." Then Angel asked, "And if you wear a helmet, it will sufficiently conceal your face. It should be acceptable, right?" As if expecting an answer, the angel glared at them, and the players had no choice but to nod and said yes. Completely understandable. The angel added, "All right, shall we proceed then? Please be careful because when a guild reaches its destination, you will all be weakened and have to try again with another guild." One inquired, "Oh, which guild are we going to stop? And are we supposed to retry the guild if we fail?" The angel said, "Oh, I forgot to mention. You'll be facing the guild in the order of dwarves, elves, and humans. The difficulty level increases in the same order." Another inquired, "Oh, so what if we fail in the dwarf guild?" The angel chuckled and replied, "Your stats will drop by 20%, and you'll have to tackle a more challenging intermediate level." In essence, the more they failed, the tougher the next challenge became. When this realization dawned on the traitors, they had one singular thought, and they said, "We must succeed in the dwarf guild at all costs. This is our only shot." The traitor group was resolute, but they remained oblivious to one critical fact. As long as Ryu was in the picture, the odds of successfully completing the quest were slim, and Ryu smiled and said, "Wouldn't it be convenient if I found and eliminated all the traitor groups right from the start? After all, I've memorized their faces." Then Ariel unfurled her wings and said, "Now, it's time to go. Traitor group, may your betrayal bring delight to those above." With a radiant burst of light, Ryu and the other 29 traitors vanished, and their mission to protect the Dwarf Guild had officially begun. In fact, the Dwarf Realm is less challenging compared to the other two options, and the creatures you'll encounter here are mainly orcs. If you're a player with a current level exceeding 20, handling them should be a breeze. However, only Ryu, who was a regressor, knew this, and the players who had chosen the Dwarf Guild were stepping into the unknown in terms of difficulty, and it was evident from the tension on their faces. Then one player inquired, "Hey, where did our nicknames go?" Another said, "Yeah, I can't yours either." Their normally displayed nicknames had mysteriously vanished. However, some players seemed unfazed by this, and one player inquired, "Aren't they being too calm about this? Doesn't that make them look suspicious as traitors?" Ryu, although inwardly composed, couldn't help but adopt an expression of surprise. Once suspicion arose about being a traitor, it tended to linger, and he said to himself, "I need to be cautious and avoid arousing suspicion. Of course, if the traitor group exposes my identity, it's game over." While others might not recognize him, there was no doubt that the infamous Black Scythe's face was known within the traitor group. And he added, "If they even think about it, I will deal with them before they start spreading rumors about me being a traitor. I'll simply intervene if they try to expose me." As Ryu surveyed the area, he made a rough estimate of the number of players who had chosen the Dwarf Guild, and he said to himself, "It looks like around 200 players have chosen for the Dwarf Guild." Of course, this figure excluded the traitors, so the actual count of assembled players would be around 230. But suddenly, a message materialized before the players. "Escort the Dwarf Guild. Safely accompany the Dwarf Guild to its destination. Successful escort results in experience point rewards for all participants. Those who contribute significantly to eliminating traitors will receive sub-quest rewards. If all traitors are eliminated, additional rewards will be granted to everyone." This quest was not exclusive to the regular group. Even the traitor group could earn experience points by successfully escorting. However, it was highly unlikely that the traitors would cooperate willingly. Failure this time would drastically reduce their success rate in the next summit, especially if they reach the human summit. And if the traitor group failed to complete the mission from the dwarves to the elves, they would face the daunting task of stopping the human guild, which was most difficult. In addition to suffering a 20% stat drop twice, they probably think it's an impossible feat. But Ryu was confident, and he said to himself, "Experiencing a 20% stat reduction twice won't impede my hunting. Moreover, this debuff vanishes after this round." While Ryu focused on the progress window, the other players were in awe. Current participant count. Participants, 230. Traitors, 29. One player inquired, "What's going on? Why can we see the number of traitors?" In fact, the participant count was displayed for all to see. Then another inquired, "Are there really 29 traitors among us?" And players exchanged suspicious glances. While they couldn't see each other's nicknames and couldn't identify each other, one thing was clear. Among them, there are 29 traitors, no doubt. Well, Ryu, who knew their faces, could easily identify the traitors. At that moment, a voice pretending familiarity caught Ryu's attention. It was none other than Min Juri, and she said, "Oh, Black Scythe? Wow! I never expected to run into you here. Did you choose the Dwarf Guild? You didn't follow me, did you?" Seeing her overwhelming joy, Ryu couldn't resist complimenting her, and said, "Well, your buffs are quite handy." However, it seemed that his response held a slightly different significance for Min Juri. Her sudden blush and flustered expression gave it away, and in haste, Min Juri blurted out, yeah. "But, Black Scythe, why can't we see the players' nicknames?" Ryu replied, "Well, I'm not sure." Ryu pretended not to know and turned his head, only to lock eyes with one of the traitors, and that player grinned ominously, then looked away. Reading his thoughts, it seemed he wanted to act like he knew him due to the camaraderie of being in the same group. Then Ryu said to himself, "Crazy, are they really trying to reveal that they're in the same group?" And Ryu couldn't express his frustration openly, so all that came out was an incredulous laugh. Then Min Juri said, "There are 230 players at the Dwarf Guild. It's fewer than I expected." Ryu said, "Yeah, true. With just 230 out of 2,166 participants, it was undoubtedly a smaller number. This meant that the remaining 90% had gathered in the other two guilds. It was clear evidence that the Dwarf Guild wasn't very popular. And Ryu said to himself, "Most likely the Human Guild has the most players. It was the same before." But suddenly, someone who recognized the Black Scythe approached cautiously and said, Black Scythe?" Ryu said, Co Aaron?" Co Aaron, with a pleasantly surprised look, greeted Ryu with a warm smile and said, "I didn't expect to meet you here. It's really nice." But Co Aaron's gaze naturally shifted to Min Juri, who was standing next to Ryu. Her smile disappeared as if it were a lie, and inquired, "Min Juri is here too." Min Juri smiled and said, "Co Aaron? "Hello, it's nice to see you," she said. Yes. Unlike Minjuri, Seoaran's reaction was less enthusiastic. It was probably because she had noticed that Minjuri always seemed to be with the Black Scythe, and it had caught her attention. It was only natural to have a fondness for the Black Scythe, who had saved her, but it shouldn't go beyond that. Strangely, she felt a twinge of jealousy towards Minjuri. Then Ryu asked, "By the way, where's the person who used to always be with you?" She said, "Oh, Kyung-ho, no, and Sang Cheol went to the Human Guild." Ryu inquired, "The Human Guild?" And when Ryu asked with a puzzled expression, Seoaran also looked unsure, and she said, "For some reason he really wanted to go there." He replied calmly, "I see," but secretly, Ryu was surprised and said to himself, "Even though I said it's the most difficult level, going to the Human Guild, unexpected." Did he want to hunt stronger monsters and earn more experience? Ryu wondered if he had underestimated Ansang Cheol. Just then, a rumbling sound caught their attention, and they turned to see a procession of wagons approaching. There weren't many wagons, just 10 in total, which was more than enough for 230 players. The players felt relieved that there were fewer wagons than expected because it meant they could easily keep track of the ones they needed to protect. Eventually, the wagons came to a halt, and the dwarf, just as they had imagined, stepped down from one of the wagons, chuckling heartily, and said, "Welcome, I am Heimer, the blacksmith of the Dwarf Guild. It seems like you are the warriors from other realms who will be escorting us. Is that correct?" The players nodded in agreement, and Heimer enthusiastically clapped his hands together and said, "I knew my intuition wasn't wrong. You all have a different aura from the ordinary thieves group." And with a hearty laugh, Heimer pointed at the wagons and said, "The cargo here consists of various ores and metal materials, which must be transported to the Albit's kingdom beyond the Karago Mountains. However, the road is infested with monsters, so we had no choice but to seek help from a higher power, the divine." Despite being a language they had never heard before, the players understood the dwarf's words, and they could only understand it due to a message that appeared. Round feature, translation activated. You can now communicate with beings from other realms. In fact, in a world where angels had already become part of the landscape, whether beings from other realms were real or not, no longer held significant weight. For the players, it was a matter of fulfilling quests and moving forward. However, Ryu understood that this wasn't such a straightforward affair, and he said to himself, "This is round 8, our first encounter with beings from other realms. It's crucial to start building a positive reputation now so that we can receive future benefits when interacting with these races." Most players would simply pass by and not pay much attention to their relationships with beings from other realms. But Ryu knew better, and he said to himself, "The beings from other realms won't be limited to just this round. They'll continue to appear, and the reputation we establish now will carry over. This is why making a good first impression was essential. If they started with a bad reputation, turning it around wouldn't be easy. In this regard, the traitor group was a hindrance. And would they kill the dwarves to prevent the summit's arrival? If they did, their reputation would plummet. And Ryu added, "If that happens, not only will unnecessary fights erupt when we meet the dwarves later, but we'll also be at a disadvantage in receiving various benefits." In fact, dwarves were known to provide legendary-level weapons and divine materials, among other valuable rewards. No sensible player would want to miss out on such advantages by clashing with the dwarves. But the traitors don't know that, so their eyes were full with murderous intent, and wherever Ryu looked, the traitors were watching the dwarves intently, ready to strike at any opportunity. However, the traitors were aware of the consequences. Killing dwarves in front of other players would undoubtedly label them as traitors. So, they could only bide their time, unable to act recklessly, contemplating when would be the best moment to eliminate the dwarves. Then Ryu added, "Ideally, it's best to assassinate them discreetly." There were a total of 20 dwarves at the Dwarf Guild, with 2 in each wagon. If they succeeded in eliminating all the dwarves, it would result in a victory for the traitor group. However, if even one dwarf survives, it will be considered a failure, and in that case, the traitor group would be forced to target the next guild, the Elf Guild, known for its specialization in elemental magic. And Ryu said to himself, "It's easier to target dwarves with no combat abilities than elves who can manipulate elemental energy with their magic." While contemplating these thoughts, a dwarf shouted loudly, "Warriors from other realms, we humbly request your protection." Then the system message appeared. Time remaining to reach the destination, 04:59:59. Now they had to protect the guild for the next 5 hours from the horde of orcs. And Ryu said to himself, dealing with orcs should be a walk in the park. While some players were on edge, uncertain about where or when monsters might jump out, Seo Arin, Minjuri, and Ryu seemed remarkably composed. The rhythmic clattering of the carriages signaled the players to adjust their positions. With weapons in hand, they maintained a vigilant stance, and it didn't take long for them to encounter a band of orcs. And one player inquired, "Are these orcs? These guys? Didn't we see them back in round 5? The players' faces relaxed as they recognized the orcs. While these creatures had been formidable opponents in round 5, they were no longer a significant threat. Most players had reached levels beyond 20, equipped with the skills to easily dispatch orcs. Then the players killed the orcs. It was very easy. And one player inquired, "There seems to be quite a number of orcs. Why do these creatures keep popping up endlessly?" Players were already growing weary as orcs relentlessly emerged from various locations. And after approximately 5 minutes of battle, the situation came to a conclusion. A mountain of countless orc corpses lay before them. Ryu had a precise estimate of their number, and he said probably around 4,600. Although it might seem like a considerable quantity, disappointment clouded the players' expressions, and one said, "The experience points from this. It's just a drop in the ocean." Experience points were lower than anticipated because they were evenly distributed among the 230 players, because they were all in one party. Strictly speaking, 29 players out of the 230 players were excluded, and the traitor group consisted of individual players, not a party. As a result, experience points and items acquired from defeating monsters belonged entirely to them and weren't shared with others. At that time, system messages appeared in front of Ryu. "You have defeated an orc." Experience points 3 times buff is currently in effect. Experience points increased by 1.5 times due to the title effect. Experience points plus 0.18%. Gold plus 40. Current kill count 463 out of 100. All